Oral questions by members.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The critical work of advancing reconciliation can't be left to a minister, a premier, even a government. It needs to involve everyone in British Columbia and include all of us as elected representatives. 3 weeks ago, in response to the MLA for Skeena, the Premier committed to, and I quote, "Whatever steps we can take, whatever resources need to be brought to bear, with his help and with the help of the other members of this House, I am confident that we can bring together a plan that all of us can be proud of." End quote. Important words that would bring to life an important step that would begin the work. It would allow all of us to hear directly from First Nations if the Premier were to do what he could do today, and that is activate the Select Standing Committee on Aboriginal Affairs. Now, with just 2 days left in this session and 4 months before we're back here again, it's a simple ask. It would mean the Premier meant what he said. It would engage all of us in this absolutely critical path to reconciliation. So to the Premier, will he do what he said he would, make sure that we're bringing resources and opportunity to the table, and commit today to reactivating the Standing Committee on Aboriginal Affairs?
Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, I very much appreciate the spirit of the question. It seems to me that she rightly points out the non-partisan nature of this issue. This has been a difficult period, as the member has pointed out, and our thoughts are with the people who are grappling with the implications of the Kamloops residential school. I think that the House unanimously stood up and supported the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People Act and indicated that it is non-partisan in nature. This issue involves all of us. My door as minister is open to all members who have constructive suggestions on how we can work together to address this challenge of reconciliation.
Leader of the Official Opposition, supplemental.
Well, thank you to the Minister, and while I appreciate that answer, now more than ever, words are not enough. People in this chamber need to send a strong signal about how absolutely critical it is that we work together to listen, to learn, to work constructively with First Nations. And one of the ways that we can do that is by taking a small but significant step. Yesterday, the Premier told me, and I quote, "Committee work is onerous, it's time-consuming, it takes up work to read the reports, complete the report, prepare the report," end quote. Well, of course it does. And that is exactly the point. As legislators, we need to take the time to do that critical work. There are 2 days left in this session, and it will be 4 months until the next time we will be together in this legislature. Work can and must be done during that period of time. And again, it is bigger than a single minister, it is bigger than a premier, it is bigger than a government. It is time for us to send a clear message, to create a place where together we can listen, we can learn, and do the work that tells First Nations in British Columbia we are prepared to move beyond words and take action. So will the Premier honour the commitment that he made to move beyond words, to take action? It's simple. He could do it today. He could reactivate, begin that work with every person represented on that committee. Will the Premier today commit to activating the Standing Committee on Aboriginal Affairs?
Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I much appreciate what the honorable leader of the opposition has said. She has said that words are not enough. I completely agree. She asks that we work constructively in a nonpartisan way. I think that's absolutely true, and I agree with her as well that this issue is much bigger than government, a particular government. I think the idea of a standing committee of the legislature on Aboriginal affairs being reinvigorated is definitely an idea worthy of consideration, and will ask my government to consider that as we go forward. But a standing committee, the Speaker, is but one vehicle to do the work of which the honourable member has spoken. There are many vehicles that we need to work on together to achieve reconciliation. And as we come out of this pandemic together, there may be opportunities for a more normal functioning of the legislature where this type of activity would be appropriate. So I think, Mr. Speaker, it's an idea very worthy of consideration. And through you, I thank the honourable member for her suggestion.
Member for Skeena.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in relation to the request to strike up a legislative committee, it's not just an idea. It's a process where members of this legislature can come together and actually breathe life into what the Premier promised. And those are nice words coming from the Minister of Indigenous Affairs or Aboriginal Affairs, but that's all they are. They're just words. And these empty words and these empty speeches are what got me into politics in 2003 in the first place. Because I heard so many speeches about reconciliation and closing the gap of the standard of living, but nothing ever changed. Not until our council took matters into our own hands and actually started working with industry and government. And we got tremendous progress. I've said it before, my band is not talking about poverty anymore. There's many other bands that need help. Canadians need help in healing from what was discovered in Kamloops. The commitment that was made by the Premier was pretty clear. We will do what we can together as a legislative body and work together. There's no need to think about anything unique or extravagant. You've got a process already. It's called a legislative committee that hasn't been enacted in the 4 years that I've been here. Now is the time to act. And stop talking. Canadians and British Columbians are the ones now asking for action. So my question is to the Premier. This is not the time for rhetoric or for empty speeches. Will he get down to business and activate the Select Standing Committee on Indigenous Affairs?
Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Well, through you, Mr. Speaker, to the honourable member for Skeena, it is not just words. These are not empty words. Our government has released a consultative draft just on Friday last, a consultative draft with 79 concrete, achievable actions to achieve what we all committed to in this place when the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act was enacted. These are concrete actions in social areas and resource areas and revenue sharing. The government has spent considerable sums of money on housing, for example, on reserves, something which is not done in other parts of Canada since it's primarily a federal responsibility. $3 billion over 25 years is to be shared with the 204 nations of British Columbia with gaming revenues. These are not mere words. These are examples of the concrete actions we need to take together to make lives better for Indigenous people. Whether the particular vehicle that's been proposed by the member, namely resurrecting and reinvigorating that particular committee, would be part of that solution is an idea that is worthy of consideration. But to suggest that these are merely words is a complete misstatement of what this government has done successfully and will continue to do throughout its mandate.
Member for Skeena, supplemental.
A misstatement of words. Who do you think you're talking to here?
Through the chair, member.
Through the chair, who does the minister think he's talking to? I was born on reserve. I still live on reserve today. The incident that happened in Kamloops affects 203 bands. It affects me directly. There are people in Canada that are in pain, that want to do something about this. You've got a vehicle ready to go. What's the delay? What's the fear? A commitment was made by the Premier that members of this legislative body could actually address something together. We're at a historic moment where Canadians and British Columbians are asking the leaders to do something in real terms, not just talking. At least respond to the citizens of BC. But don't take any condescending remarks with me in relation to First Nations issues in BC. And don't hide behind an UNDRIP speech or hide behind a stump speech. This is not an election. We are dealing with people's lives. We talk about the initiatives that are possible here. We talk about protocols and respect, but the committee hasn't sat a single day in the 4 years that I've been here. So maybe the Premier can hear this and hear his own words in what he said in relation to me and what we could do in cooperation with everybody in this legislative body. Activate the committee. That's the request from the member from Sandwich North. That's the request from myself. That's the request from this side of the House. I'm hoping the Premier isn't actually delaying the announcement simply to use it as a prop when he goes to visit Lower Post. Yeah, let me hear your groans. Based on the minister's response to what I just asked, the previous question, let me hear your groans. Because I've been listening to this my entire life. Politicians making promises and empty speeches, but nothing happens unless it's for a political agenda that doesn't serve Aboriginal interests. Delaying this standing committee for politics is unacceptable. So again, my question to the Premier, stop the lecturing. Get off the rhetorical, I can't hear you. Members that side of the House, I can't hear you. Can you speak up?
Member, continue. Member has the floor.
I'm waiting for the laughing to stop.
Just ignore it.
Come on. Let's hear
Members,
it. Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. Let me hear the groans then. My question to the Premier. The lectures have to stop. You have to get off the rhetorical high horse, stop the delay, and allow British Columbians to start healing together. Will the Premier activate the Select Standing Committee on Indigenous Affairs?
Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I very much respect the member for Skeena and the pain that he refers to. I really don't believe that our government can be accused of merely wordsmithing or simply making political statements on an issue like this. There's no such, I don't think there's any reasonable suggestion that that is the case. We acknowledge the healing together of which the member has spoken. We have been in touch, for example, with Kuki Casimir of the Tekomluk Shuapmuk people, who has apparently working on submitting a budget and a proposal to specifically address the issue of the Kamloops school. We are listening to other nations who have come forward in respect of this particular issue of bringing home the lost children, terms of calls for action 71 to 76. I'm working in close coordination with the Minister, Mark Miller, at the federal level to address this critically important issue. It's not words, Mr. Speaker. There's a budget available. We are working to standing by for specific requests from different nations, and we will take them as they come forward, but only taking our lead from those particular nations, all of whom, in the diversity of the Indigenous community in British Columbia, will have a different path forward. And we want to be respectful of that. We believe that concrete actions are required. I very much reject the idea that this is rhetoric or that it's words. I think the actions we have taken as a government since 2017, inside and outside the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People Act, show we are putting the resources there to deal with the legacy of colonialism that is reflected in the Indian Act. And we need to make concrete changes in our system of government as a province to address those realities.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Yesterday, Stand.Earth released a report that finds that this NDP government has doubled oil and gas subsidies since they took power in 2017. The report found that by 2023, this government plans to spend almost $1.8 billion on fossil fuel subsidies, more than triple what the BC Liberals spent in the last year that they were in office. Let's be clear, Honourable Speaker, what this means. Billions of dollars of public money is driving the expansion of fracking and LNG terminals in BC. Honourable Speaker, this government likes to say that BC has the best climate plan in North America. They sell British Columbians the idea that we're somehow climate leaders, and yet they pump billions of dollars into the fossil fuel sector, which is making it impossible to meet our climate targets. Meanwhile, the United States is eliminating fossil fuel subsidies altogether, replacing them with clean energy incentives. The reason, according to the US Treasury, the subsidies, they said, undermine energy independence, undermine the fight against climate change, and harm air and water quality in communities. These are not lofty goals. They are the very least we should expect from government in a climate emergency to protect water, air, and our future. My question for you is to the Minister of Energy, Mines, Low Carbon Innovation. How can the minister explain his government's massive and increasing handouts to fracking companies when the rest of the world is going in the other direction?
Minister of Energy and Mines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Leader of the Third Party for her question. I'm very proud of the work our government has done. The Green Caucus and the former member for Oak Bay Gordon Head did when it came to creating Clean BC. Together, we developed the strongest climate action plan in North America. Our government has a plan to fight climate change, build a clean energy economy, and make life better for British Columbians. We are dedicated to keeping BC on track to meet our emission reduction targets. My mandate from the Premier provides direction to me to undertake a comprehensive review of BC's oil and gas royalty system, an action that the old government refused to take. This review will be done to ensure the system meets our goals for economic development, a fair return on our resources, and continued environmental protection.
Leader of the third party, supplemental.
Wow. So the member for Skeena mentioned, thank you, Honourable Speaker. Thank you, Minister. The member for Skeena mentioned rhetoric, and that answer certainly summed it up. I'm sure that the Minister for Energy, Mines, Low Carbon Innovation is proud of the $1.3 billion in fossil fuels in 2021. He's proud of the deep well royalty program for fracking operators that cost taxpayers $421 million. He's proud of the outstanding liability that has grown under this government to $3.1 billion from those royalties. Is he proud of the fact that this government is giving more to oil and gas companies by a wide margin than what they're receiving back in revenue, and that the people of this province, including the youth in particular who are going to inherit this climate-changed world, are on the hook to pay for these royalties for decades? It's not a lot to be proud of, Honourable Speaker. Spending billions of dollars to subsidize the fossil fuel sector isn't just terrible for the climate, it's terrible for BC taxpayers. It's moving our economy in the wrong direction. A month ago, I asked the Minister of Energy and Mines about a landmark report from the International Energy Agency, which forecast a deep decline in the global market for oil and gas and said we don't need any new LNG projects, warning they could become stranded assets in a world that is moving on. At the time, the minister said he couldn't speak to the report because he hadn't had time to digest it. It's been a month now, and I assume on a file as important as this one, analyzing this report and its implications for BC and our economy has been a priority for this government. My question again is to the Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation. Will the minister acknowledge that it's now clear that LNG is not the way forward for our economy? And can he please tell us what he is doing to urgently change course and fix this government's mistake on LNG?
Minister of Energy and Mines.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Leader of the Third Party for her question. I'm afraid the member has mischaracterized the way the program works, and that is disappointing. Credits are not paid or owed by the government to producers. They partially reduce royalties that must be paid when production occurs. But to speak to the review, which is underway, the ministry has commissioned an independent review of the royalty system that will be undertaken by 2 experts from academia and will be released publicly once complete. The report will examine how the royalty system works today and consider whether it is positioned to achieve BC's goals into the future. After the independent review is made public, the ministry will conduct public outreach to ensure all British Columbians have a say about the future of resource development in our province. After collecting public input, the ministry will review the royalty system to ensure it meets BC's goals for economic development, a fair return on our resources, and environmental protection.
Member for Abbotsford South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the Premier, for reasons only known to himself, is playing favorites when it comes to which veteran groups to support. It took repeated questioning for the Premier to finally provide support for the Legion. Yet, he chose to deny the Army, Navy, and Air Force veterans that same respect. Randy Williams, the president of ANAVETS in British Columbia, has written another letter to the Premier, and I quote, "All 16 of our units in BC have endured exactly the same financial stresses as the Legion during our periods of mandated shutdowns as we struggle to pay operating expenses, insurance premiums, and property taxes." End quote. So my question to the Premier is, can he tell us if he will finally do the right thing and treat these veterans as the same as Legions and provide them the funding they need and deserve?
Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I think we can all agree that every member in this House supports our veterans. We certainly respect the work that these organizations do. As I shared with the member last week, we have received the requests from the organization. In fact, staff have found there's multiple other organizations as well that serve veterans that didn't request dollars, and so we've proactively reached out to them as well to see what their needs are, and we'll have some more information for the members once that those discussions are complete.
Member for Abbotsford South Supplemental.
Thank you very much, Mr. Premier. Well, the Premier managed to give his office a boost of almost $4 million this year. The cost to treat the ANAVETS equally as the Legions is under $200,000. And while it's great that the minister has given us words that he's looking at others, Randy Williams, the president of the ANAVETS in BC, has written in his letter, quote, "Both entities provide invaluable contributions and assistance and support to our esteemed veterans. So to only choose one rather than both to receive the funding is essentially saying our members and services are not as worthy or valuable in your government's opinion and thought process. Last week, the minister said, "We received the request and we're working on it and we'll have more to say soon." There's 2 days left, Mr. Speaker, through to the minister. 2 days left. So again, will the Premier, will this minister admit right now and give a yes and provide the exact same funding to the Anavets as he did to the Legions?
Minister of Jobs and Economic Recovery.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I appreciate the member's got a piece of paper that he's got to read off of, but I just gave him an answer, which is there's other organizations as well that haven't requested dollars that are serving veterans. We have proactively reached out to them to assess their needs to ensure that we can support as many organizations as we can. Honourable Speaker, we're proud on this side of the House that we have the highest per capita supports for people and businesses in this country, and we're going to work with all the organizations that need supports to find ways to ensure that they can have the dollars they need. And we also continue to talk to the federal government as well, because we believe Veterans Affairs Canada can do more as well to support the important work that our veterans organizations do here in British Columbia.
Member for Kamloops, South Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, when bungling isn't enough, the Premier moves straight to botching it. The PNE has been crying out for months and months, noting that they need significant financial support to survive. The Premier then goes and bungles this file by playing jurisdictional games. But, Mr. Speaker, he did finally decide to announce a program. He unveiled the program and he said, and I quote, "It's attractions like the PNE that we had in mind when we developed the program. This was designed for the PNE," end quote. Those are the Premier's words. And then the Premier botched it. It turns out that the PNE does not qualify for the funding in this program. So can the Premier please tell us why he designed a program to help out events like the PNE, only to then develop criteria for which events like the PNE can't meet?
Minister of Tourism.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The Premier and I did make an announcement. We announced $50 million to support anchor attractions across the province, across the ecosystem. We worked with industry leaders, targeted funding, up to $1 million for some folks, up to $500 million for others in rural communities, up to $500 million for tour bus operators. And the ministry is reviewing applications as we speak with good news to come, hopefully in July. Well, definitely in July. That was the announcement that we made. But I just want to put it on the record, Honourable Speaker, because the Liberals like to kind of play their games with technicalities. The PNE is an independent, not-for-profit organization wholly owned by the City of Vancouver and governed by a board of directors. In addition, both the PNE and the City of Vancouver make annual capital investments. The PNE, there's the PNE Fair, there's the Playland Amusement Park. Let's emphasize amusement park, because this anchor attraction was intended for amusement parks and big things that you can't move. And good news is going to come in the coming weeks. And I'm very proud of that announcement that we made with the Premier. Thank you so much to the members opposite for the question. It's one thing that we've done in addition to the other efforts that we put out there to provide relief to the tourism sector that have been hit by this global pandemic. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Member for Kamloops Thompson, supplemental.
Well, where to begin with that, Mr. Speaker? Good news is yet to come. Just like, I suppose, what's happening in BC's cruise ship sector. This minister kept saying, good news is coming, and she says it all of the time. Here we have a minister who says one thing and does another when creating programs. They announce a program that they say is intended for events like the PNE, only to then have eligibility criteria that the PNE can't meet. That's not a technicality. It's also not a technicality that this government is number 8 in the country at getting direct grants and relief out to businesses and organizations. That's not a technicality. Mr. Speaker, this is another attempt of this Premier who has a pattern of showing up, making a splashy announcement, and then he disappears. And the minister can do her darndest to rewrite history, claiming that this particular fund was never intended to support events like the PNE. But if that's indeed the case, then the Premier shouldn't have made shouldn't have included the PNE in his comments when he announced the creation of this program. This from Shelley Frost, the president of the PNE, and I quote, "The BC Anchor Attraction Program excluded applications from events and festivals. As a result, the PNE was not able to apply for support for the largest part of our business, the PNE Fair. During the program launch, the Premier said this program was designed to support organizations like the PNE. However, we were disappointed that the most significant part of our business is not eligible." End quote. So again, to the Premier, why did he say one thing, then do another thing, and in the process completely botch this file?
Minister of Tourism.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. What we've done is we've worked with the tourism sector. We took counsel for those that work in the tourism industry. What we announced was $50 million to support anchor attractions across the ecosystem. That's in addition to the 4,100 tourism businesses that received a grant. Grants Not Loans, which was also a call to action. We've met with the PNE. We value the PNE. I've been going to the PNE since I was a kid. There's more to the PNE just than the PNE Fair. There's the playland, and all of the grounds. That's the part that the member opposite wants to dismiss and overlook. I've talked to the mayor of the city of Vancouver. I've talked to my federal counterparts about supporting the PNE and us working together, all hands on deck, all levels of government working together. There's $400 million on the table from the federal government. We're going to make sure that BC gets its share of that funds. We're going to continue working with the sector to support them. Good news is going to come in July, Honourable Speaker. Thank you very much.
The bell ends the question period.